Thank you so much. Thank you. My dad's name was Ted, and he really liked to talk. So this is for him. I invite you to ask yourself the question, who am I? You don't have to become what other people think you should be. And you can change your mind, many times, in fact. When I told my dad I wanted to go into stand-up comedy, he wasn't particularly supportive. He said, "You need a career you can fall back on." And I guess he didn't think comedy was one of those careers. But the dream has to be bigger than the no's and the fears. And my dad never did take no for an answer, so either did I. In high school, I could only see as far as my boyfriend's future. Some of you relate to that. It's a little bit codependent. Yeah, I was the girl that brought the beer to the band in the garage. That was it. I had absolutely no idea or vision of what I wanted to do. My parents, seeing this situation, were adamant about me going to college. And just to get them off my back, I said I'd go for 1 year. Well, much to my amazement, when I got to college, I started discovering a whole new world and a whole lot more about myself. I even joined a sorority. Don't judge. It was in that sorority I started doing some comedic sketches, and I had these old glasses from my grandmother. I called them my magic glasses. And I would put those glasses on, and I would just become someone else. And it was so much fun. I never had any idea I could actually do those kinds of things on my own. So while I was going to college to pursue a degree in social services and corrections, mostly because I didn't have to take math, I would have to pass the theater arts building. And I would stop outside, and I would just listen. I would listen to the creativity spilling out of those windows. And something would stir, and I was so drawn to that building. But there's not a career that you can fall back on in that building, right? So I would keep walking to class, and I would stuff that feeling away. I did get that degree 4 years later. I never used it, but I do have it up on my shelf. It's very dusty. I would tell my parents years later, "Don't worry, it's not like that money went to waste, because I do provide a social service, and when people heckle me, I correct them." Two years after I graduated from college, I finally got up the nerve to audition for a play. And to my amazement and terror, I got the part, like the lead part. I came home and I looked in the script and I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to remember all of this? But I did. I did it. And I was energized and I was full of passion and it was so fun. And when I stepped out on that stage for the very first time, it was this old wooden creaky floor and it had these big dusty burgundy drapes, and I stepped out on that stage and I heard the laughter of the audience and I felt that connection. I knew I was home. It felt a part of me that had been waiting for a long time. Are you home in your careers? If not, why? I went on to audition for every play I could for the next 5 years. I couldn't wait for the next one to come out. And one day, there was one play that was going to UNLV as a one-act competition. And I hadn't tried out for that one because it scared me so bad, honestly. I was like, no, that's way too scary. But the lead actress had to move suddenly. And they called me and asked me if I could fill in for her. So I did. And I was very scared. But we went down to UNLV, and I was sitting out in that audience, much like this. and watching all those one-act plays, one after another. And I was running through all these emotions. And something was going on inside of me, much like I felt standing outside the theater arts building, but this time it was undeniable. And I turned to my friend and I said, "This isn't just a hobby for me." So we came home, and with that feeling still firmly cemented in my consciousness, we were having dinner one night. And I had been doing some goal writing and masterminding, and I was really understanding about the power of attraction way a long time ago. And I said, "What is keeping us from doing what we want to do? We keep talking about it, but we're not doing it." And I turned over my placemat at this restaurant, and I did the old Ben Franklin T-square. And I wrote all the pros and the cons about going to Hollywood. I mean, I had a job and a family and security and a condo. Why would I leave all that? Right? And at the bottom of the T-square, there's a little fork in the road, and me as a little stick figure with a little bubble out of my mouth going, "Help! Do I stay in Nevada with all my friends and family and security, or do I go to Hollywood without any idea what I'm doing to pursue my dreams?" Shortly after that, I had to drive by Marquee every day on the way to work up at Lake Tahoe. And it was a casino, and it said, "Stand-up comedy talent search." And I would kind of go, "Oh, that looks fun, but no." I'm not a comic, but I would love to go to that. Well, one of my friends knew that I had this plan. I was talking about going to LA to study acting. And she said, "So are you going to audition for that? Are you going to do that contest?" And I said, No. It's for comedy. I'm an actor." And she said, "Oh, so you're going to go all the way to LA and do that thing, but you can't even do the thing right here in your backyard." So she kind of called me out, ticked me off a little bit. So just for fun, I called and I got the information. And she said, gave me all the rules and regulations. She said, "Shall I put you down?" And I said, "Yes." What came out of my mouth? For the next 3 weeks, I had heart palpitations before that contest, I'm telling you. And when I showed up there and I was backstage, I realized I was in way over my head. I mean, these people were there for the money. They were comics. They had jokes. They had 3x5 cards. They were talking about who they opened for, and I had just my stories. So that's what I did. I went up on stage, and I just told stories that I've been telling around the dining room table for years. And I got some laughs, and it was so fun. And I didn't win, but I didn't die of a heart attack, so it was a success for me. And afterwards, some people called me over and they said, "We really enjoyed you. How long have you been doing comedy?" I said, "About 10 minutes. And they said, "Don't quit. Don't quit. You really have something. Don't stop. You could be the next Carol Burnett if you wanted to be." She was my idol, right? So they gave me a whole bunch of phone numbers if I ever decided to go to LA, and a month later, that's exactly where I was headed. I drove to LA with $300 in my wallet and a belly full of fire. I had no idea where I was going to work, where I was going to live. Didn't matter. I just knew it would all fall into place. And I got there. I lived on my uncle's couch for a couple of months. And I just jumped in with both feet into stand-up comedy. I went to every open mic night I could in Los Angeles. And I was in love. I mean, my dad was right. There was rejection, there was negativity, there was fear, but I didn't care. I was doing this thing I love, so the no's don't deter you, right? So my very first gig, I got paid $50 bill. I was so impressed with myself. $50 just for talking? And being a nice, small town girl, I wrote the owner of that club a thank you card. True story. I did. Well, about a year later, that same man opened his own comedy club and tracked me down to come open his club, right? So I go down there, and it's my first comedy club ever. And I'll never forget, I walk in, and unforgettable turquoise shag carpet, gold-flaked mirrors. Oh my God, I had arrived. I was in show business. I was so excited. So, like the first night, I realized the headliner is a complete wreck. He's going through a breakup. He's sad. I'm an empath and a good ear, so I'm like, "Come talk to me. Come tell me about it." So he tells me his whole story. We quickly bond. He calls his agent to find out if he has anybody booked for him for the next 5 weeks on the road. He didn't. So I was it. So my calendar went, I had just quit my day job too. You know, I wanted to save my money and have the bills paid off and be real responsible and do all that kind of good stuff. None of that happened. Because I went to my day job one day and they tried to promote me. And it was going to be like they were going to pay me double the money. And I was like, thank you very much, but I have to quit. They're like, what? I go, no, you don't understand. So, yeah, I just knew comedy would provide. So my calendar went from nothing to 5 weeks worth of work in a couple days. So I worked from one end of the country to the other, learned a lot about myself and my craft. I would make $20 stretch for a whole week on the road. They used to call me the bean queen because I'd buy a big bag of these beans at the condo and cook them up, and that's how I survived. But I didn't care. I was loving my life so much. Well, after about 6 years of that, one day I was packing to go on the road, and one of those baby shows was on TV, you know, those childbirth shows, the ones you can't really look away from. And I started watching this show, and something just shifted in me. Maybe it was the sound of a big door closing, I don't know. I was 36 and single, and there was no prospect of having children. I was in love with my life and what I was doing. But I had a knowing that I wanted to be a mother for the first time, a very strong knowing. So I kind of shifted my direction a little bit, and I started thinking about marriage and motherhood. And a year later, I was married. And I knew I didn't want to raise children in Los Angeles. I wanted to go home to the Carson Valley. So we moved back to the Carson Valley. And by the time I was 43, I had two beautiful children, Jonathan and Emma. And you know you're getting too old to have children when you can't even read the results of the EPT test. Where's my readers? I don't know. They also told me I would never have children, so I'm like, watch this. So now I've got these two amazing human beings. They're my best work. And I didn't want to leave them. I didn't want to get a nanny. I didn't want to raise them in hotel rooms, slamming fingers in the hotel drawer. No, see? Perfect. A baby just cried. So I had to get creative, like how was I going to stay home with these kids? So I remembered the saying, everywhere you go, there you are. And I figured there's a way to do this. And sadly, when the kids were 2 and 7, I went through a divorce, which made things more complicated. And I struggled. I struggled to make a living, to be home with my children. And it was said to me by people who will never understand me, why don't you just get a real job? Why don't you get a real job? And that would just make me dig in even more. So I started booking and producing a show. I started doing corporate events. I started teaching a stand-up comedy class. And that enabled me to stay home with my kids. And as I taught that class, I learned a lot more about myself as well. I became a student, and I was doing some deep soul-searching about stand-up comedy. Like, I'd been in the business for 32 years, and I wasn't sure if I still wanted to be in the business, because I know when I first got in, it was very healing for me to make people laugh. But I did a lot of work, a lot of journaling, a lot of talk therapy. And I came to a place where, you know what, I don't think I want to be a paid people pleaser anymore. I don't think I need your validation anymore, people. Right? Then I started asking myself, well, who would you be if you weren't a comic? That made me feel like I jumped out of an airplane without a parachute. So scary. Right about the same time of introspection about my career, I became an empty nester. My children left home the day you pray for. You can't wait for that day to arrive, but when it comes, I had no idea what to do. I felt like an elephant that had been taken off the chain. I was walking around in circles in my living room, looking for stray socks and candy wrappers and orthodontic rubber bands. Will I ever find those, all of them? I don't think so. So with the prospect of letting comedy go and not being an active mother with children in my home to control all day, in a loving way, I really had no idea who I was. And I went through about a year of feeling very, very depressed. Okay, maybe 2 years. Because I really didn't know. Did I have a career to fall back on? Was my dad right? I'm looking at retirement and putting kids through college. What was I thinking? But after some deep introspection about comedy and doing a lot of work on myself, there were plenty of issues. I began to realize that I don't have to take from the audience to fill the empty and broken parts of myself anymore. But I can give to them from the parts of me that are healed and overflowing. So I was like, okay, good, I don't have to quit. And I also started doing some keynote speaking because I always knew I had something else to say. And, keynote speaking is very different because the very thing you live for as a comedian is all that applause and laughter. But when you're speaking, you have to get very used to the sound of nothing. I had to make friends with the silence. And when you know your why in life, like I asked you when you first came out, it's the first question I ask in my comedy class, who are you? And we are more than our titles. Our titles change through life. You don't have to identify with your career completely because at some point that's going to go away. And then really, who are you? But if you know who you are, the chances of you being able to listen to your own authentic voice to guide you in your passion, in your life, in your career is a lot more likely you're going to hear that. But at the end of the day, who are you? I invite you all, when you go home, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to go home and I want you to look at yourself in the mirror. And I don't mean check for imperfections and, check your butt. I mean really look at yourself in the mirror. Look deeply into your eyes and see that light that is in your eyes. You are born with that light and you will carry it with you all the days of your life. That is inherently who you are. I hope you not all have found careers that you can fall back on, but also ones that you can fall in love with. I did. Thank you.